Hassel here, co-host of the Nerdy Man Room Show. And we proudly present to you Man Room Shorts. Your discretion is advised.
Go straight over and Hassel. How about you introduce them to our interview?
All right, everybody, we're here with a very talented Mr. Daniel Garcia. We're so excited to have you on board today. Monster, give us a little tagline here, baby.
Yeah, well, we've got Mr. Daniel Garcia, indie comic enthusiast, fan of all things considered nerdy, numbed out horror fan, creator of Xyber Ronin, El Martillo, and if I say any of these wrong, correct me, and Covert Action Cyber Baboon. I will eventually get it right. That's a tongue twister for me.
You're good. You're good.
Novice fan of philosophy and a white belt of hundreds of martial arts, including life. And you can find him on Facebook at Daniel Garcia and on Instagram at D Garcia Comics. And I'll try to remember to ask you again at the end of the recording here to tell us those again and anywhere else we can find you. But sometimes my brain doesn't work, and I've been at work for a lot of hours a day. So if I forget to ask, just break in and tell us anytime.
No worries, man. I appreciate the introduction. Thank you.
Yeah, and we always have questions and stuff, and I think like we were telling you before we even started recording, we like these conversations to be organic and questions come as they do. But to start off, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know Hassel and I have talked to you on social media, but this is the first chance we get to talk to you in person.
Yeah, no, thanks again. Thanks for having me on. I know that it could be a big deal finding people for indie comic creators. I think it could be a big deal for us, coming onto a podcast to talk to individuals such as yourselves who have these podcasts. And I know I've looked at your other podcasts in the past, and I know that you've had on much more talented people than myself. I like to consider. So, even being considered to be on is great. And what me and Hassel were discussing, I think a few weeks back, was with this upcoming Kickstarter that we have coming up. I'd like to put something in there about the Nerdy Man Room, in one of the books, kind of like as like a promo piece for you guys. And then I'm also promoting a lot of the artists that have helped me get to where I am today, because I feel like paying it forward is a big thing for me, and not just reaping hopefully some rewards, right, and some benefits of what I'm doing, but also paying that forward and helping other people out, even if 10 people read the book and one of the artists happens to get commissioned because of that and the art. I think I've done my job, so that's a big piece of it for me. Or someone jumps onto your podcast and maybe helps you guys out. To me, that's the biggest thing, is just helping out and paying it forward. So,
well, I've seen the art and I've seen the concept. There's going to be a lot more than 10 people read this book, I promise.
Thanks,
once
man.
you get this thing going, it's going to be big.
I appreciate it, brother. Thank you. I'm actually wearing a Xyber Ronin shirt, if you can see it. And we
sweet.
actually, we had a few of those made, and then I got some magnets made too, which are pretty cool. And then we got some pins made also. So it was
sweet.
Yeah. So, and my girlfriend has been a big she's been a big influence on me, even getting this stuff started. So I want to thank her also. She's been fantastic with the whole thing. So Carrie, thank you for even helping out with getting this started. And then to talk about me a little bit, man, I've been in the comics since I was listening to one of your podcasts a couple of days ago, Hassel and Monster, and you guys were talking about G1 toys and stuff like that, it's like I had posted something about, I think it was G1 Transformers, I think you were talking, or scale size, and I see you have a bunch of toys there in the background. I've been collecting comics since I remember my first comic book was, I want to tell you, it was the Zoo Crew, Captain Carrot and the Zoo Crew, back in the early 80s, and I remember, I swear to God, it's a true story. I'll never forget this because I got my butt handed to me by my mom. I picked up a Frank Miller Wolverine #1, and I remember looking at it, and we're at this little store in a Spanish neighborhood, so Spanish people have their own concept of kicking the crap out of their kids and being okay with it. So I remember picking up this Wolverine issue #1 and walking through the store with it, and it was they're called bodegas, or a little market for Spanish people basically. And I walk out of the store with it, and my mom turns to me and goes, "Where did you get that?" And I'm like, "Oh man, I forgot to pay for it." And I got the beating of my life. And she drags me into the store and pulls up tells the manager, the owner, he comes over and she goes, tell him what you did. I'm like, I stole your comic book, man. I'm sorry. So that's my experience with comics when I was a kid, you know. And then as I got older, introducing my daughters to comics and then really being just kind of like an escape, you know, like the neighborhood I lived in was terrible. So we didn't have a lot of money, and like comics for me were like, I learned how to read because of comics. I think I learned how to be a better person because of them, you know. And like as my daughters grew up, I introduced them to comics, and then now my daughter's actually an artist. She's a fantastic artist. Just graduated college last year, and my little one is about to go to Juilliard. I hope in New York here soon, and you know all that creativity is just. I think that comics are good for you. You know, I think that they're good. So I figured, you know, what better way to I think to honor myself and the people around me that have influenced me by making my own comics, right? So that's kind of been my take on it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we want to ask you some more about the upcoming releases and what you're looking at, the Xyber Ronin and everything. But I wanted to ask too, since you brought it up right away, is what are your comic influences? What are some of the ones that you really, if you look back over your time, what's some of the comics that really influenced you to actually want to even get into creating them as well?
Yeah, you know, I think for me, personally, superheroes that I've felt most relatable to, right, have been like the Wolverines, the Spider-Mans, right? Because like you put yourself into a position where my normal job is I'm an investigator, right? So I work as an investigator, and I help solve economic crimes. So I'm around bad people all day long. I investigate them, help put them away in jail. Not that I'm Batman or nothing, right? But so, you know, but those have been some influences for me, like the right and the wrong, right? So Batman, especially the Spider-Mans, the Wolverine, because at the time being macho was cool, right? So the toxic
anti-hero
masculinity, yeah, like the toxic masculinity thing, I know is taking a hit, but for me, those were big influences for me to begin even reading comics. And then getting into indie comics, Turtles. I mean, come on, Ninja Turtles, give me a break, dude. Like 4 turtles with nunchucks and swords running through the city, kicking the crap out of bad guys. like how much?
Where can you go wrong?
How could you go wrong with that, right? So for me, that was the beginning, and then I think that some of my influences now with Xyber Ronin, being involved in martial arts for a lot of my life, and then like, you know, developing a character that for me was I've always felt like kind of out of place. Being Latino, I think that has a lot to do with it, and trying to make myself a place in society with people that maybe there's a lot of biases, a lot of, you know, people that may look at you differently. It still happens to me, even with my career now. Creating a character that is from another planet, number one, right? It's a freaking rabbit, right? So you don't get any crazier and stranger than that, right?
No.
But he's trying to do right by where he's living, which is now in New York City, right? Kind of following on the footsteps of the Turtles, and then fighting crime. I mean, like, you know, how much cooler can you get? You know, I think than that. So.
Yeah, that's really cool. I know I've been stealing all the time, so Hassel looks like he wants to ask a question, so I'm gonna let him ask right now. Because
that was some of the thing I was kind of curious about, because, you know, I've seen the concept art of, you know, him and some of the other characters look amazing. I'm blown away by them, you know, each day when you guys post things and all. And tell us a little bit about your artist. I mean, you have like, are you cycling like through several artists, or you have one guy that's going to be your primary illustrator? Or?
So again, this goes back to I'll go back to the paying it forward. I'm in a position in my life where I can afford to put a comic out, right? And I'm surrounded by people, fortunately for me, like my girl, who is a big, not only is she an influence, but she's also helping me promote this stuff. Like these shirts, these were her idea, you know, and she paid for them. So like, if I could afford to do that, I'm gonna pay it forward to other artists that may need commissions, right? And they're good, right? So I'm gonna hire you and have you do a couple pinups for me. And if I could post that onto my page and say, hey, check this guy out, he's good, right? Like Sergio Medina, who I've hired to do a couple pages for me. I mean, the list goes on and on. Ariel Mendel, that guy's amazing, you know. And then my main artist, and I'm gonna butcher his name, he's Brazilian, Maiku Oh yeah, Oliveira, right? And you would think that I would, I'd be better.
I
at
was
pronouncing-
wondering how to pronounce that myself because
I'm butchering
I've
it, man.
interacted
I'm
with him a
butchering
little
it, but
bit through Facebook, and I'm just like, how do I say this?
yeah, he's the main artist. Him and I, we went back and forth on email, and I said, hey man, I got a concept, and it's a rabbit. He's cybernetic, and I want to put it together. And he goes, all right, cool. He sends me some sketches, and I'm like, that's it. That's the drawing. That's what I want him to look like. Right? And he's like, okay, let's go with it. And then so he's been the artist ever since. And then my colorist, he goes by the name of Saul Chavanas. He actually lives in Mexico. The guy's just super talented. So I'm like, I got to bring this guy on board also. And again, just paying it forward and just, Hugh Rockwood has been fantastic also. Hassel, I'm not sure if you've seen Hugh Rockwood stuff. He's helped me, and again, just trying to develop this Kickstarter, get all these artists on board with me, and then just run with it.
How much do you have kind of in the can, so to speak, as far as longevity wise? How long have you kind of mapped it out? Because I know a lot of creators they map out at least 12 issues or so. How far? I'm sure you have a good bit, but I'm just curious.
So currently I have in my mind and in the can, so to speak, I have one issue down, right? And I'm waiting to have a full issue and a half done to promote the Kickstarter. Then to supplement that, I've also commissioned another artist to do a backup story, right, along with this story, so that when I'm ready to put out issue 1, it's going to have a slew of pinups. It'll have a pinup book. It'll have, it's gonna have a lot of fun stuff behind it. I'm ready to roll right into issue 2 with a backup story, and then 6 issues out, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go right now. 6 issues. You just got to continue to draw it. So I'm ready right now. 6 issues at least. Yeah,
that's awesome. And I wanted to ask if and I don't want to do any spoilers or anything, or because I know you're waiting to get everything out there into people's hands and stuff. But what can you tell us about the Xyber Ronin in the universe there and some of the characters? Because I'm going to go back and say that I saw a bunch of the artwork on Instagram. I don't have Facebook because I'm not a very big social media person, but Instagram I have, and I got to tell you that Hyper Hair has been my favorite one so far.
Oh, you like that? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Good. Yeah. No, I gladly answer that. So let me just start off by saying, Hassel and I had this conversation. I think it was this morning. I'm not the biggest Instagram or Facebook guy in the world either. I use it for work to bust bad guys because bad guys leave a trail, especially on Instagram, Facebook. So I'm good there, and Twitter. Bad guys are the worst. They'll tell you where they live and what they're doing. So it's the best for me. But in terms of being fluid with all those different types of social media, I'm terrible myself. So the character is, as I mentioned to you before, is from another planet, right? And I wanted to, and not to overstep myself here, because I know a lot of artists and creators will say, I created a whole universe or a whole galaxy of heroes, right? And here they are, and they're like shoving them in your face, and it's like, I think you're jumping a shark a bit there, when you're saying I created a universe, So I don't want to come off like saying I'm like, but in my mind, the way that I pictured it was, all right, so it's a different galaxy, right? So, and it's this conquering force of aliens, right? And they travel from planet to planet, kind of taking over, and they get to this one planet, and it's called Harion Prime, right? I'm thinking, okay, Hare, H-A-R-E. I'm just going to add an I-O-N to the end, right? So that's Harion. Cool. It's a planet of rabbits, right? But essentially, the planet of rabbits, being in the martial arts, I've always been particular of like the Japanese arts, right? And their culture derives from like the samurai culture, right? But more modern, obviously, because it's in space. Gotcha. So and then this invading force comes in to their planet. They're defending themselves, and then my main character, he's in, you'll see this in one of the other issues, other than the first issue. It's going to come up in the second issue. He's fighting off the invading force by himself, and he takes out like a bunch of these enemies. And the general takes note of him and goes, "Oh, this guy's pretty badass, right? Like he's killing all my dudes, right?" And then so they manage to take him captive. They put him aboard like the mothership, right? And they're looking for more soldiers to to go out and conquer the rest of this universe. And since this guy is such a fantastic fighter, they implant him with this chip to control him. His body's already damaged from the battle, and they begin to reconstruct him cybernetically, right? And then they put him through a series of tests. Something happens to him during this process where he dies, and then he enters this void. I called it the Ember Void, and the reason it's Ember is because of the color, right? So it's the Ember Void, right? So he enters this Ember Void where he meets this god, and it's one of like his gods from his planet, right? Because he's from this other planet and they worship their own gods. And this god says to him, hey, this isn't your time. I'm not gonna let you die. However, I am gonna put you on a path of revenge. But in order to do that, you gotta escape, but I'm gonna do most of the work for you. And he burns out the chip in his head, so he's not controlled anymore. He escapes and he falls into Earth basically in his ship. And the ship is called the Hutch, which is like, I guess, where rabbits sleep, right? So it's called the Hutch. So, all right. So he comes into Earth, he crash lands. And when he's on Earth, there's this other organization, your typical bad guy terrorist organization, right? That want to like rule the world kind of thing. And they find him, they track him as his ship lands on Earth, they take him captive. So now he's like, holy crap, like now I'm having to go through all this again. And then he manages to escape them as well, and now he's in the city, and he gets blamed for a series of crimes, and he's like, okay, I can't have that happening. And then that's when the first issue kind of takes off.
Man, that's really
It's cool. A lot. I know it's a lot to soak up, but
no, that sounds really interesting. I'm sold already. So I know, there's many others that will be sold very quickly. We got to get some people to back this cause.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and as you said, it's a lot, but I'm a lifelong comic reader. My very first book I ever read when I was 3 years old, my grandmother gave me from the 1960s, a Superboy and Legion of Superheroes Digest, one of the small Reader's Digest size ones they used to make, and that was the first book I learned how to read. So when you say it's a lot, it is, but as soon as you start talking, I'm like, okay, I can see all this now because I'm used to looking at that on the page.
You can picture it almost in your brain, so you can almost like
as lifelong comic fans, you just you hear it, and start visualizing this entire scene. The question I have is, everyone when they read comics, you have a certain voice that as soon as you read certain characters. I mean, like when I read Batman, it's always, the animated series Conroy.
Sure. Yeah.
So who do you hear in your mind when you're writing Xyber Ronin? Who do you hear as the voice of your main character?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animated series, Raphael, I think, had like the raspy, like badass voice, right? Like he was like the rogue kind of guy. And I like that voice, that kind of emulate that voice, I guess, in my head is what I would hear. He's like that real rough around the edges kind of guy, but at the same time, he's a good guy, right? He's good.
Cool but rude.
Huh?
He's cool but rude.
He's cool but rude. There you go. He's the cool rude dude. Yeah, I remember that from like the animated series. Yeah, that's right. And like I didn't want to make him like a Conan, so to speak, right? Where he's just like Conan has his own like agenda, and I think that it's his own personal agenda to make himself to live through the world of Hyboria, right? This is more. I think he's more of like my character. Xyber Ronin is more of like just that he's a warrior that has a code of honor, right? And he has to, follow that code. And now that he's on Earth, he's going to help out the Earthlings do what they need to do, to be okay because of his fault. He came to Earth, and now he's bringing in the second issue. You'll see, and Monster, you were asking a question about the hyper hair, right? So
yeah.
There's a series of bounty hunters that come looking for him. At the end of issue 1, something happens with him where he releases this large amount of energy, Xyber Ronin does, and it alerts this alien force that essentially built him. It alerts them because it's such a powerful force. It's a blast. And then they're like, oh, well, we know where he is, so we're going to send in these bounty hunters to go get him. So in the beginning of issue 2, you'll see I created a character called Xyber, who's this bear, but he's like cybernetic.
I saw that one. That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
That's
and he's
really
like,
great.
yeah, I thought it was great. And then the way that it came out was fantastic. And then you'll have these other characters that are like space, police more or less, and they come to Earth also in that issue. And then you'll be introduced to them as well, and they kind of all fight. And there's some other stuff that happens on the second issue, and it kind of explores. I like the depth of the characters a lot also. And depth, I think, comes through circumstance. So you're faced with a circumstance as a person, how you deal with it builds your character, right? And it kind of shows the world what kind of person you are. So it's kind of what happens here is that he's faced with a few things, and it kind of builds on that perception of who Xyber Ronin is and the people around him. So I kind of like that mentality of building it from that perspective too. So
well, it's great layers you have going right there. I mean, you have him pretty much getting your revenge on his planet for his planet while becoming a protector of a foreign planet, and at the same time you have bounty hunters who are definitely evil, but then you have cops that probably aren't good or evil per se, so to speak, where they're just trying to nullify things, I suppose.
Yeah.
That's a great deal going on there. I mean, that sounds amazing.
Thanks, man. Thank you. Yeah, and then you'll have other stuff like in the background also going on. So just trying to add some depth to it. I'm not the master writer, but there's a lot of influences for me. Like you guys had something in my intro. I know you had written something about novice philosopher, right? So for me, like I'm really big on philosophy. It's helped me manage through a lot of stuff in my life. A lot of not to bore you guys, but a lot of like the ancient Stoic Greeks. I'm all about that stuff, man. Seneca and Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius. I can read that stuff all day. And one of the quotes that the ancient philosophers, one of the things that they live by is like the 4 virtues, right? So it's it's being just a good person all around. So for me, like this character embodies all that. Right. So as I'm writing it in my head, I'm like, oh, well, I want this guy to be that kind of character where he embodies those 4 virtues, and he's just a good dude, he's just a good guy, and I don't want him to be like the Conan type, I want him to be more like, I remember as a kid, Monster, to bring up something you mentioned earlier when you were a kid reading comics. Now that I think about it, my first comic book was sneaking into my parents' bedroom. My dad's a Marine, by the way, so my dad didn't sleep on the bed. He slept on the floor most of the time because he went through the Vietnam War, and he was like kind of, he was dealing with a lot of stuff. Sneaking into my parents' bedroom, crawling on the floor, and pulling out my dad's Conan magazines out of the drawer that he had, and he stashed them away. Drawn by John Buscema, by the way. And
Yes.
I'd flip through those magazines, going, "Oh my God, like this is amazing!" Like. How did my dad leave this out, like for me to find, what's going on here, but, and then, modeling a lot of my life after all those heroes that I had. So.
Awesome. So if we switch gears for just a second, I wanted to ask you kind of what's the process, what was the process you went through to start creating all this and to putting pen to paper, I guess, because, Hassel and I joke around a lot of times, like, what would we do if we could write one, but we never stop long enough or have enough. At least for me, I can't say I have enough common sense to sit down and write a book anyway.
we fleshed out a lot of ideas between shooting the shit.
But it never goes any further than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so all of us on this call, I think we have 40-hour plus work weeks, right? So it can be challenging. Yeah, it can be challenging. So I think that for me, I journal a lot, and I'll journal my thoughts, and I'll write down what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking. I'll write down quotes during the course of the day. Not to sound corny, but it just helps me in my mind. I'll jot down positive quotes, especially from like, ancient philosophers and stuff. And I'll take note of those things. So the transition over into writing didn't come easy, right? Because you're in front of your computer, you're tired as heck from the day, right? You're beat up. But when you start putting your thoughts onto paper, you write for 100 hours a week, you'll get a good 2-3 hours out of that of solid writing. And I don't know if that makes sense. You just write and write and write and write until stuff starts to make sense to you. So for me personally, it was just writing, man, just getting in front of a computer and just writing my thoughts and then breaking those thoughts down into a process and saying, here's what I want the first issue to sound like. This is what I want the whole story to sound like. It's a long process, but at the end of the day, when you see your book in your hand, you're like, oh, this is pretty cool. So it worked out pretty well.
Very satisfying, I would imagine.
Yeah, no, it's very satisfying. It's I have 100 ideas. Hassel, I was texting you the other day, or I was messaging you, and I'm like, oh man, I got a bunch of horror stories that I want to. I'm like, I love horror, man. It's something I would love to write a horror comic at some point in time in my life. Just a lot of ideas. You just have to be focused on one at a time.
Yeah, when you messaged me that day and you was like, hey, I got a few ideas, I'm gonna run by you, and I was like, I'm excited already. Love. So when you're ready, you shoot them over.
Yeah, you got it, man. Absolutely, you know it.
That's pretty cool. So how did you get linked up with the different artists you're working on? I'm not even going to try to say the name because I know I'll butcher it. I apologize, but I have one dialect and it's Southern, and it doesn't take care of a lot of others. What's bad is I actually from work I have some friends who live in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and stuff, and I talk to them all the time. But I'm like, there's a lot of times they tell me you have to slow down because I didn't understand anything you just said.
Yeah, for me, whenever I'm like designing something, I think as I write it, right, I want to see a certain style to it. There's a certain style to every story. I don't know if that makes sense to you guys. This is the way I see it in my head. Yeah, like when you say Superman, right? So there's been just a plethora of artists that have drawn Superman over the 75 years that he's been around. And then there's certain ones that I'll say, oh, okay, well, I like this art better. It's more mentally and visually stimulating for me, right? So when you walk into a comic store and you see a cover and you're like, oh, this cover is cool, right? You don't look at the book and go, whatever's inside that book must be great, so I'm going to buy it without looking at it, right? The cover's got to catch you first. And then the art has to match, in my brain, the artist behind it. So for Xyber Ronin in particular, I got on Facebook and I got on Pinterest, not Pinterest, sorry, Reddit, artists, right? There's artists that post stuff on there. Yeah. Reddit, Facebook, Instagram, and then there's, digital webbing. There's a bunch of different platforms that you can look for artists for. I spent some time looking to try to find the right artist for it. It takes time to find the right artist. And then when I found Maiku, I was like, oh, this guy's style is great. And for me, personality goes a long way also. Because if you're an artist and I write you and I go, hey man, I'm interested in doing a book with you, and you go, okay, cool, right? And then I go, oh, okay, well, what's your page rate? And you just give it to me. It's like, well, dude, I want some more interaction. This is the guy I'm going to
business. You have to have a relationship between the two of you.
You gotta be in sync, right? Hassel, I think you said the other day, you were like, oh, well, great minds think alike. I mean, you're right. Like, I need someone that's going to push my stuff, because essentially it's his stuff too, right? It's our stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I need someone that's going to, you got to have a personality behind it. You can't just be like, yeah, well, here's your stuff. Good luck. Then you need to have a certain personality behind it to say, all right, this is my guy. He's good. He's affordable. He's intelligent. And his personality is just, it's big. He's good to get out there and want to push your stuff with you, because at the end of the day, it's all our success. It's not just mine. He's already gotten, Maiku has gotten, I push stuff to him all the time. People tell him all the time, hey, who's your artist? I go, dude, look this guy up now. He's amazing. He's honest. He's fast. He takes PayPal. He's a real good dude that you can just have a conversation with, and boom, he gets work. So we all win at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hassel, you look like you're fixing to ask something, unless I cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just taking it all in, because I'm just, I love to hear the creative process behind all this stuff. Like me and Monster and a few of our other buddies, that we've had some on the show, some not. For years, off and on, we've sketch things out, or like Monster would come up with an idea for a book, and like especially like we were probably in high school, we were all, oh man, we thought we had big aspirations. Monster would flesh out an idea for something, and I'd sketch a few things, and our buddy Josh would sketch a few things, and so we love to talk with creators who are actually getting their things out there, because we didn't have the maybe the guts or the fortitude to go ahead and push it through all the way. We just kind of get 80% through and then say, okay, You
No.
guys are doing it. So it's amazing to talk to guys that,
Yeah.
you know, are getting it out there.
No, that's okay, man. It's all right to, you know, it's okay to get as far as maybe as where you've gotten. And then I think for me, it's a famous coach, and I can't remember his name. I have to forgive me, but he said, "Hustle beats talent when talent doesn't hustle," and I'm a big believer in that. So I may not be the most talented guy in the world, but I'm gonna hustle to get all my stuff out when I want to get it out, right? And you got to have like there needs to be a certain drive behind that, right? So like, I'm gonna surround myself with people like you guys and the people that I work with who are number one better than I am, right? at doing this kind of stuff, right? Because you want to always be. If someone ever says to you, "Be the smartest guy in the room," then you're not doing something right. You want everyone around you to be the smartest people in the room, right? So that's what I want to be. I want to be around the guys that are better than I am at this stuff, so that am not only learning from them, but I'm feeding off their mojo, right? And what they got to show. So 80%, that's not bad, Hassel. You're already half of it, man. And then it's just a matter of finding someone else and say, "Hey man, what do you think about this?" And running it by him and saying, "Can you help me with this part of this?" Right? And asking for that help. And then there's nothing wrong with that. I'm terrible at asking for help, but I'm learning. I'm learning, man. I'm learning that it's
So
okay.
that's a strong male trait sometimes. The best of us suffer from it.
Dude, tell me about it. Having a Marine Latino dad, you don't got to tell me, man. So
I can imagine.
You don't got to tell me, man. But so yeah, not to be long-winded, but that's pretty much how you start, and then you just live it, man. You live, breathe. Comics. I obviously have other hobbies that I do, but sometimes stuff takes a back burner to it. I'm big into fitness. I'm big into spending time with my family, all that stuff. But sometimes this takes a back seat. I love horror stuff, dude. Listen, we watch horror films every night of the week, literally. That's why when I said numbed out horror fan, because I'm numbed out, dude. There's nothing shocks me anymore. But sometimes that takes a back seat, and I gotta sit and write. So.
Understandable. So you mentioned you have a lot. Do you still collect any comics today? Any not necessarily mainstream, but any comics in particular that you really enjoy?
Yeah, I think comics for me, I think recently I'm more into the indie stuff. I think there are still some good reads out there. Not to make a long-winded answer out of it, but I like reading trades, Monster. I like going back and picking up. I can show you now a handful of trades that I have from just wanting to collect an entire row or entire issue of something. And I'll hit a comic store and I look for old stuff, man. I don't even look for any stuff that's on the wall now. I like a lot of the older books and
Same here.
Yeah, man. It's just like I think as we get older also, I think that a lot of the things that may have interested us at one time, we read now, like you were talking Gen 1 Transformers. You watch that nowadays and you're like, man, what did I see in this? The art isn't the
Some
greatest.
episodes are tougher than others to stomach.
Yeah, but I'll sit through it just because it was a love of mine as a kid, so like I'll sit through it still. But so not one thing in particular, man. I just kind of I'm a big Turtles fan. I'm a big I'll still read a lot of Wolverine stuff. A lot of the stuff when I was a kid, I still love it.
Cool. Yeah, I have a huge trade collection and a lot of the new stuff right now. You'll hear us talk about it. I buy a lot of stuff and I kind of feel obligated to read it at this point, but there's only like one or two titles and I'm like, oh, I really look forward to reading this now.
What do you like to read? What do you guys like to pick up?
Well, me, I like the older stuff, like what you were saying, because at one point, Stan Lee done a great job of getting messages out there without getting too political.
Agreed.
And somewhere along the way, they kind of just lost that method because Stan Lee, he could put the X-Men out there and basically hammer home a message about racism that people wasn't even knowing they were getting, or Peter Parker, who had the worst look ever. And somehow he still chose to be the hero of the story. The Fantastic Four family. I mean, you had these stories, and I mean, he was hammering home values and messages without hitting certain things, and they've kind of lost a lot of that to me. So Me, I still pick up Spider-Man right now. That's
Love Spider-Man.
about it.
Yeah, no, that's
that's
stuff.
That's one of the two books that I'm still enjoying. I mean, I like I said, I pick up a lot of stuff, but my two right now are Spider-Man and more for nostalgia and anything. And there's no political stuff really inside of it, but I'd love to pick up the current Power Ranger runs that Boom Studios are doing because there is no political stuff and there is just straight 90s goodness.
It is straight 90s goodness.
Ninja ass kicking. That's all you need.
A lot of butt kicking. That's all I need. There was an issue of Spider-Man. I think I actually got teary-eyed when I read this as a kid. It was the issue where Spider-Man visits this kid that's going to die. The kid doesn't know he's going to die, right? Yeah, and he visits him and he pulls his mask off and he's like, "Hey, I'm Peter Parker," and he's like, and then he leaves there and the kid ends up passing away. Come on, like, when was the last time you read something like that? I mean, I don't know. I can't think of it. When was the last time you picked up a book like that?
Yeah, I know the one in particular you're talking about. I may still have it. I used to have, and just as an aside, I used to have this big storage shelter shed, whatever you want to call it, at my grandparents' house, and it was about, I say big, it was about 300 square feet, but that thing was filled from floor to ceiling with boxes of comics. Tornado took some of it. Tornado took some of it away, but a lot of it's still around. Yeah.
I was talking to another person, another big influence of mine is Stephen Butler. He's all over Facebook. This guy he used to draw Spider-Man. He's an ex-Marvel artist. Still draws for them on occasion. Him and I have, I would say the guy's like a mentor of mine. Him and I have deep dialogue at least once a day. About like just life in general. So he's not only an artist that drew Spider-Man at one time, but he's just a good dude. So like just talking to people like that also. It's like it's just influential for me. Like to surround myself with those kinds of people who are just good people that know about comics. And value that stuff, hassle, like you're saying. You're right, man. Like, I don't want to listen. Don't push your views on me through a comic, right? Like, let it be what it is, man. It's a person that's, Peter Parker. Listen, Logan. I'll give you in my opinion, Logan. Talk about being down in your luck. Like, that character had been through it all. So, what's the appeal for me as a man, right? Is here's a dude that's been through so many things in his life. Didn't know who he really was imbued with this this skeleton that was unbreakable with these claws and this. He's only 5 foot something tall. It's like, but he's mean as hell, right? And he just goes through his whole life and he's just had it rough, but he still perseveres and he's still the hero. So like, how could you beat that, man? That's great stuff. No politics, no pushing your agenda on me or who's whatever classification you want to say nowadays. I don't give a crap, but he's just a dude going through life being a hero. How could you beat that? So, to me, those
are... Monster has discussed this a few times, so I love to get your take on it. Did you find Wolverine more interesting when he was just Logan versus knowing he's James, like before he got the memory back?
No, I liked him better before. I liked him better. I liked him better when he was... That's it, man. Like I was reading Sam Keith's Wolverine where he meets Cyber. He meets Cyber and he's like he climbs up the side of this wall with his claws and he gets into the top of where Cyber's hiding and he's like oh I recognize that scent and then Cyber comes out. He's like, oh crap, and he takes off running, right? I'm like, whoa, what could scare Wolverine? You're reading this and you're like, this guy is like the baddest dude on earth. Like what could scare him? Yeah. And that whole run, you're like, oh, that's what scared him. All right, cool, I get it, right? But for me, it was that mysteriousness. You're right. Of like, who is he? Why is he such a badass? Why does he have these? Weapon X by who was it? Who drew Weapon X? Walt Simonson.
I believe so. And then oh man, who was writing that?
It was like a 12-issue miniseries, right?
Did Portacio do any of the art on that too?
No. I think it was. I want to say it was Simonson. This is back in the 90s. It was the Weapon X run where it was showing him from beginning to end of how he got how he was chosen for the Weapon X project.
That was the one that had the famous yellow cover that looked like a vanilla envelope or vanilla folder that had the slashes through it and all that.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the Marvel Comics Presents where they were telling Weapon X stories every issue.
I remember that too. Yeah, I remember that also. So, but like, getting more into the character and learning more about him was just again, it's an influence for me for Xyber Ronin. I think that it's, again, like, taking a character and saying, all right, I'm going to take you from your homeland. I'm going to strip your body and make your mind, work differently. And I'm going to imbue you with these abilities. And now we've killed your whole planet off. And now you're a hero. Like, here you go. Like what kind of effect would that have on a person? Right. So that's kind of what I was thinking when writing the character. It was a big influence for me, was Wolverine.
Yeah, and you're right. I was looking it up while you were talking. As Simpson and Barry Windsor Smith did some of it too.
Smith. There you go, man. Thank you, bro.
Yeah, I had to look it up because it was bugging me. Now I was like,
thank you.
I literally see it, but you're just like, holy shit.
BWS, yeah, Barry Windsor Smith. Yeah, there you go. That's great stuff. You can't beat that stuff nowadays, man. That's just classic writing. Classic Marvel.
Yeah, so I know we promised we wouldn't keep you too long because I know you got a lot of stuff going on, but I wanted to ask you if you could tell us a little bit more details about the upcoming Kickstarter and if you have anything set up for that or what the details are on it.
Yeah, so I plan on launching at the end of the month. Not having been a part of a Kickstarter project myself, but seeing other people that I know go through trials and tribulations with it, I want to make sure that I'm handling it correctly and I'm not taking on too much workload. The idea is a launch by the end of the month. I'll do a pre-launch, obviously, beforehand. I'll ask people on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or wherever else I can get my hands on. It's limited on the outreach of people that you can, it's a platform, right? Social media is a platform, and as many people as you get to be a fan of yours or to be interested in doing what you're doing, you're reading what you're doing can be difficult because again, you're limited to a platform of social media. So. My idea is to continue building on these pinups and to then eventually launch at the end of the month. But I want to have enough content so that, like I see some Kickstarters and people are like, oh, give me $20 and I'll send you issue 1. And you're like, what? $20? Like, what's that? What do you mean? Like, it doesn't cost that much money to print the book, and then you're going to ship it. So I want to be fair also. I want to say fair, but I need to make money and recoup my money at the end of the day also, right? So while it's not about the money, it's also about me being able to put out more content later on, so that's part of it. So the idea is that by the end of this month, I'll have the Kickstarter ready to launch, and then it'll be fun. Like I have some original pinups by Stephen Butler, the guy I was telling you he drew for Marvel. He's agreed to sign some stuff for me, and then give it as a tier. So there's original pinup stuff in there. There's pinup books. There's cards. There's shirts. It'll be a lot of fun by the time I'm done with it. It won't be just your average Kickstarter. I shouldn't say average, but it'll be good. But by the time I'm finished with it, I think people will feel like they're getting a bang for their buck. And then I wrote a really touching intro to it. When you're able to go onto the page, I'll send it to you guys. You guys can read it. But it talks about. My introduction talks about, my daughters when they were little and how they would play superhero, right? So, I remember putting a cape around their necks and saying, go be a good guy, and then they would go and rescue imaginary animals, right? Like the stuffed animals around the house. And I really put a lot of heart and soul into that introduction. And it actually took me back to when they were little, and it kind of was nostalgic and teary-eyed for a moment. I'm not afraid to say that, but. So it just the introduction itself will give you some insight into how I feel about comics and how they've changed me and what they've done for me in my life. So I think the introduction alone is a hook, but it comes from the heart. So let's just put it that way.
Cool.
And knowing that as a fan, that you love to invest in that sort of thing. When the creator is just as passionate as you are about what you're reading, it's great.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that, brother. Thank you.
Yeah, because to Hassel's point, as soon as you start the Kickstarter, I'm going to try and be the first person to donate to it because I want to be a part of it, right? And,
I appreciate
and it sounds
it.
Awesome. And
so I'm sensing a competition here, Monster. Like, who's going to be first? So
no, you guys don't.
It'll be my luck that he'll get there before I do, just so he can rub it in because I'll be somewhere for work, traveling or something, and he'll never let it go.
Man. I appreciate you guys just even having me on the call, man. That's having me on this call today. That's more than enough. But I appreciate you guys, even taking the time.
Yeah, and one of the things I wanted to ask you too is as you're going along with this and you're getting further into the Kickstarter and and the Kickstarter's going on. We're hoping that maybe you can send us a few updates across, the time frame of that's going on, and maybe even come back on again before the end of the Kickstarter, or maybe even at the beginning, depending on your schedule and ours. And we'd love to have you back on and talk about it some more. And I'm not trying to rush you off now. I just wanted to bring that up before I forget it, because like I said, my brain is a little fried after today.
No, don't even sweat it, man. I meant that with all sincerity. I don't know how much it'll do by having a plug for you guys in there, but paying it forward, man. So if you guys want to plug in there, just I'm more than willing to put in something that says your information on there. So
definitely means a lot to us.
Yeah, man. Of course, bro. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and we've had a wonderful time, talking to you about it. I can sit here and pick your brain for hours, but I do know we did promise to not take up too much of your time, because I know it's family time. It's the evening for you, and
this man's got horror movies to watch.
I got a ton of horror films to watch. I've watched all of them. I find B ones, man, that I'm like, this movie's terrible, but I'm gonna watch it anyway because it's I'm gonna put her through it too. She's like, oh my god, this is terrible. I'm like, I know, but just watch it. So I don't care, man.
Some of them are so bad you can't help but just laugh, and it's just like, oh, this is terrible.
Oh man, I was watching a Pickaxe the other day. I think I actually bought it. It was like $4. I bought it's the hacker slasher film Pickaxe. The guy actually uses the pickaxe to kill people with. It is god awful. I mean, but I watched it. It was great. I watched
I had a guy at work trying to send me on a trauma film today, and I was like, I don't know. But
yeah, man. So yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on, man. And it's been my pleasure to be on here with you guys. So thank you.
We appreciate you coming on. It's been all our pleasure, especially, like I said, we get to pick your brain about this stuff, because I think we found our outlet is probably going to be more podcasting than actually writing a comic. But hey, that was one of the things we always love to do, and we still debate stuff. But again, we appreciate you coming on and spending some time with us, and hopefully we'll get to have you back again. You may blow up so much we may not be cool enough for you.
If we forgot all about the Nerdy Man Room one day.
No, man. With both your backgrounds and knowing you guys are both horror fans and you guys are awesome dudes, I'm here, man. Just let me know whatever you guys need from me. So.
We appreciate it, and yeah, we'll reach out to you, because we definitely want to share updates to the Kickstarters. You're getting into it, and we'd definitely love to have you back on. And Hassel, I didn't know if you had any more questions. Sorry, I know I didn't want to take my time too much.
Between social media, so I mean, I pick his brain all the time. So like I said, we greatly appreciate you coming aboard today and getting your word out there. And that's how we'd love to have you back, especially closer to time to kick off and in the middle of the thing to get an update. And like we had discussed, our sponsor, he's wanting to get some of your prints in the store so that we can spread the word, because he does a big thing about unity through community, and he's a big believer in the indie scene. So I mean, we'd love to.
I'm working on that as we speak. I'm working on getting you guys some prints. It's just a matter of I have to attach the logo onto the prints, and I'll print them and send them to you. So
yeah, and I think, Hassel, you made me think of one other question I wanted to ask before we signed off, is because I don't think we asked this, but the comic, you're going to do it as a printed page, or is it only going to be a Comixology online virtual sort of thing, or I didn't know which way you were leaning, or if you're going for both on that.
Yeah, I think I don't know a lot about Comixology. I know that that a lot of indie folks will use that as an outlet of theirs. And for now, Monster, the idea is that anywhere that I can get it out, Comixology is awesome. I can send copies myself if someone wants to buy them for me. Obviously, as we get a little closer, I'll have more information on how to do all those things. But the idea is just to spread the word and get as many people interested in being able to sell it from their venue, whether it's Comixology or some of the other comic sites that are available out there, and I can't think of them right now, but yeah, so.
Cool. Yeah, I'm going to read it either way. I just need to figure out where to get it at.
I'm old school. I'm like Stan Lee. I mean, a boob's nice on the screen, but I want it in my hand, so my comics are the same way.
I love the physical stuff, man. I love I love having a copy in my hand and being able to go back and pick it up and bend it and read it and look at it. I love that too. So just like boobs. So I'm joking. So
cool. Well, we appreciate it, sir.
Yes,
and we won't hold you up too much longer here. We know you got some horror movies to go enjoy, but
thank you guys.
Again, thanks for coming on, and we sincerely appreciate it.
All right, you guys, be well, be safe. Okay.
Thanks, sir.
You too,
later, guys. All right, see you.
Well, hopefully everyone enjoyed the interview. And again, we thank Mr. Garcia for coming on with us. Great guy, wonderful interview, fun to talk to. We had a lot. We could have went on for hours, but we had to stop ourselves so we didn't take up all of his time because